What's up, A to Z Sports? A little Titans at 2 DocTalk action. I'm crashing Sam's Titans at 2 party that he typically has, but a DocTalk here today, this afternoon, because we got some information about the injury to Titans punter Ryan Stonehouse that happened last December when 2 blocked punts, the second one being pretty ugly, knocked him out for the season against the Colts. Got the special teams coach Craig Aukerman fired, and we haven't really known much of what's gone on with the specifics of the injury, but Ryan Stonehouse has done a little real estate this offseason, but I know trying to get back here on the football field to go into his third season in the NFL and was on a great trajectory as an NFL punter, breaking records in his first year and a half before this injury. So we're going to dive into what the report of the injury was from Paul Kaharski and what the rehab aspect of this looks like as the Titans start really their offseason workouts really this month and after the draft, and we'll see where Ryan Stonehouse is as we approach this upcoming NFL season. And all of our Doc Talks are always brought to you by the Bone and Joint Institute, boneandjointtn.org, the region's destination for comprehensive orthopedic and sports medicine care. We've got Doctorate of Physical Therapy, Dylan Green, on us here with the Tollgate location with the Bone and Joint Institute as they're growing rapidly across Williamson County to be your spot to go to whenever an injury pops up. So Dylan, thanks for jumping on. Excited to learn about this deep combo of injuries with Ryan Stonehouse. How's it going today?
Oh, going great. I'm glad y'all are here, and I'm glad to be on air.
Absolutely. So this will be fun. So Sam, I'll let you take us through the report that came out Monday about the specifics of Ryan Stonehouse.
Yeah, Austin, like you said, we didn't know a ton about this injury at first. We knew severe, right? Looked bad, knew he was done for the season, but the question remains the long-term ramifications for Ryan Stonehouse into 2024 and what it's going to look like. And we got some information earlier this week. It's Paul Kaharski, paulkaharski.com, coming with this following report. I've learned that Ryan Stonehouse suffered a torn ACL and MCL, as well as a broken bone in his left plant leg. So 2 ligament tears and a broken bone. His spring work will be continued rehab. So still on the train to recovery here for Ryan Stonehouse. But that's what Paul Kaharski's got as far as an update is concerned. The specifics: ACL, MCL, broken bone, a lot to deal with for the Titans punter.
Yeah, I'm sure that had to be as painful as it looked for Stonehouse. So, Dylan, we've done several ACL doc talks. We've talked about what that particular ligament does. What is the difference on a basic level of the ACL and the MCL and their function in a knee?
These ligaments usually are more of a stability of the knee, and they kind of hold the congruity of the joint together. I have a little model I'll show a little bit of, but on the model, the front of the knee, this is the outside of your knee, this is the inside of your knee, here's your kneecap. The MCL is more on the inside or medial or MCL, collateral ligament. It's more extra articular, so it's outside of the joint, whereas the ACL is more, I'm going to peel this away, it's more on the inside of the joint. And everybody hears about the ACL tears and everything like that. And those are just 2 different ligaments, but they kind of help stabilize that knee from moving around too much.
So I guess it makes sense, just to jump in, sorry, Sam, but like on his left plant leg, right? Mm-hmm. And he gets hit from the certain side where that knee overextends, and mm-hmm. that's where the MCL goes along with the ACL.
Yeah, and with those like hyperextension injuries is what he actually had. Those you'll see what's called multi-ligament injuries. So this is technically a multi-ligament injury where it was the MCL and the ACL, not just one versus the other.
So what is the motion that caused that? I don't know if you can show us a little bit on your
model.
Your model here, but like you said, you hear ACL all the time, you hear MCL some of the time, both at the same time. Kind of feels like a freak incident has to mm-hmm. occur. So what exactly is the motion that the knee is going through there?
So if we're talking about like generally these 2 can happen separately or together, but if we're talking separately, usually the MCL will prevent the knee from going in this way. See how the gap's there. Mm-hmm. Versus the ACL, it helps prevent rotation and then this bottom bone from going forward. That's why you see a lot of ACL tears when players go to decelerate and cut very quickly. That knee's going forward and then also rotating at the same time. Now, in this instance, his is more of a hyperextension injury, which with all the biologics that go with it, here's the back of the knee now. If you're talking about hyperextension, it can go here, it can go this way, And in his instance, it's kind of came in from like an angle from the side and then bent backwards. And that's usually where you'll see more multi-ligament injuries is with the hyperextension injury.
Yeah, I might try not to cringe. That model's making it feel real.
That's what it looks like.
Oh man. And yeah, I'm coming up on 15 years on mine, my ACL. But so ACLs can happen a lot of times non-contact, but obviously this one was a contact. Correct. How often does an MCL happen without contact? Because I feel like it wouldn't be as common, right?
It's not as common. That you see these a lot, and also like linemen. That's why they wear these braces on both sides of their knee, because they're trying to protect their ACL as well as their MCL, and then the other ligament on the other side, the LCL, okay, which is on the outside part. And those usually are contact injuries because another lineman or a defensive end will come out and hit the knee and cause a gap on the other side. Whereas usually you'll see more of the ACLs on like the more high velocity athletes. They have to run very fast and then cut suddenly.
Yeah, and I remember, Sam, we talked this past summer when Traylon Burks sprained his LCL about what type of routes he was able to do earlier than, the other ones as that ligament heals. But so then you've got the broken bone aspect of this for Stonehouse. In Paul's report, there's no, specific bone mentioned, but is there an idea of what bone is probably more likely to have some type of break or fracture with the other two injuries?
It can be a toss-up. It can be an articular cartilage injury. It can be what's called a tibial plateau injury. And it also depends on what part of the weight-bearing part of your bone you have whenever you have that injury. So it could be a fracture on the tibial plateau, which is more on the outer surface of the lower leg bone, or it can be on the cartilage, which is inside of the bone. It really just depends on where it's at. And it kind of, when you think about the rehab prospect, you got to think about, okay, what part of the weight is on the bone versus not on the bone that's broken, or if it's even on a weight-bearing part of the bone. So it really is kind of like a toss-up of like, is it really that big of importance, or is it something that we really have to pay attention to?
Mm-hmm. Dylan, so frequently with knee injuries nowadays in professional football, the playing surface of the field is a hot topic of how grass versus turf plays on the body. You said that, these multi-ligament injuries are often contact injuries, or specifically with the MCL. So do you think the playing surface here, Titans played on turf in 2023 after making that change, does that maybe make this worse? Could this be avoidable on, normal grass?
That's the golden question now, especially with the NFL PAs talking about it, and then the NFL's coming back and saying something else. If you look at the actual research, it's 50-50. If you look on Google and say artificial turf or anything versus natural grass, which one's going to cause more injuries? A Google pop-up search will say you're going to sustain more lower extremity or leg injuries on turf versus natural grass. But if you actually dive into the research, there's been 3 articles in 2024 published already saying, hey, 50 say yes, 50% say no. A lot of the good research out there is more on soccer or the MLS side, is because they're using artificial turf and they're using natural grass, and they have a lot of good research that shows. I mean, it just depends. I mean, personally, on my end, around here in this area, we recently got a lot of turf fields, and I've seen a whole lot more knee and ankle injuries versus like the traumatic injuries. But again, it's 50-50. My personal thought on it, being from around here, we just got turf on a lot of these high schools around here, like the last 2 or 3 years. I've seen a big spike in ACL injuries. But as far as like research-driven stuff, there's bias. There's all kinds of stuff you got to think about with this.
Sure. And with Stonehouse, he was planted, right? Like, and so I guess with the turf and the grass, there's a planted foot. We always hear, and that foot's going to stick in that turf and be harder to get up, and that's where the injury can happen. But his all of his body weight is on that planted leg. So
it's all about timing. I mean, you wait a half a second later, it probably wouldn't have been as bad. You wait a half a second earlier when it was hit, it wouldn't have been as bad. It's just about timing. Because if you these guys, like when you're talking about offensive tackles that get their knees blown out from the side because somebody landed on them, well, they were just in between steps. It could have been half a second sooner, half a second later, there would have been nothing wrong with it. So it's a big thing when you're talking about like that foot was planted at the right time and at the right moment that guy hit him. It's all about right timing in that spot, in that kind of thought process.
Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this here, because we see, the fact that he is still doing his rehab in spring work, and he was away from the team, Ryan Stonehouse was, for the latter part of the season, away doing his rehab. So point one, what does that rehab process look like for a punter trying to nurse 3 different injuries at one time? And what would a typical timeline be for somebody to start feeling full strength again?
For him, depending on where the bone actually fracture is at, it could be like a typical ACL, MCL recovery time, as far as like depending if they got the MCL repaired, if they didn't have it repaired, if they actually had the ACL repaired, which they probably did more than likely. They had to go in and do some cleaning up of that cartilage if it was a cartilage injury. There's different variables you got to think about this, but overall, the biggest thing that's going to take the longest is the ACL. Usually those recoveries are usually 9 months, because a lot of research coming out now says 9 months at minimum for you to feel completely back to normal, back to like playing a sport again. Now, with that being said, for him feeling full strength, usually these guys are, again, these are the elites, like the elite athletes. They usually will feel strong back to normal within 5 to 6 months. But then you also got to think about, like, let's go back to playing and planting that leg out. You got to think about that kind of stuff. And for these guys, it's almost like riding a bicycle. They'll kind of ease back into it. Then they'll start working on, okay, how far do we need to punt today? Where can we work on direction? Can we work on location? Can we work on height? As far as full strength, these guys are about 5 to 6 months out feeling like full strength back in the leg. And then we start working on like all this return to sports stuff.
Yeah, I think we don't do a lot of punter injury breakdowns, but when you got Ryan Stonehouse, who's a really damn good one, you have to. Like, what's your experience with maybe it's more soccer players that you can kind of look at plant leg injuries and rebuilding that strength, because it's a different type of athletic movement rather than a positional athlete in football or something else, where it's not as much fluid running, jumping, cutting. It's more plant, kick, explode. What is, as a physical therapist, what are some extra things that this type of athlete position wise would have to go through that might be a little different?
The big thing is working on like dual motor task, motor control, and single leg balance. When I say single leg balance, it's not just stand on one leg and throw a ball, or stand on one leg and kick something. When I say dual task, also you got to think about, okay, he's in a NFL stadium. These guys are running full set him trying to take the ball or take out his leg. He's got to worry about where he needs to plant it at, how high. And now I say motor control dual task. That's kind of like the tail end of rehab, is really focusing on, okay, we have to make what's called controlled chaos. We got to make sure like all of these things are happening for him in rehab, so that he can transition this to a field exercise. That's what we do a lot of like here. And I've learned a lot from these guys at the Titans rehab staff too. Because like you have to make all these variables happen, because if you go out there and you just try to do it in a stadium and you don't practice it, it's not good rehab. But these guys are, again, rehab staff is the best in the world. Like they know exactly what they're doing with these guys.
Am I correct to assume that for a punter, it is better for his recovery process that this is the plant leg and not the kicking leg? Would that be a correct assumption? And what would kind of the difference be between the two?
If it was the kicking leg, I would presume it being easier to be having the kicking leg versus the actual plant leg. Only because in a kicking leg, yeah, it's a high velocity movement, but you also got to worry about on that leg that's the plant leg, he has to hit a certain moment. He's got to make sure his lead is locked out, and then when he goes through his follow through, that his hip will somewhat push off and go through that motion. Whereas this leg's just swinging. This leg's got to do all the control, because this leg is where he's getting all of his drive from, and it's also what he's working on his coordination with too.
That's interesting. I would not have expected that.
I would thought the exact opposite.
Yeah, same thing with soccer players. I mean, whenever they kick, the kicking leg's easier to kick with after an ACL tear, but that plant leg, that's where they have to really learn how to control their body, because it's basically decelerating their momentum they're running toward.
Interesting. So then my whole thought is the fear of this exposed plant leg every time he does his job. from here on out, right? Like, how do you get over? You mentioned adding the variables in there, but over the last several years, I feel like the mental aspect of physical therapy has really adapted to be just as important as the mental. So, I mean, have you been through where you've got the yips or you're a little bit hesitant, and that's got to change everything, because that plant leg planted and exposed every time he does his job has got to be jarring.
Oh yeah, yes, exactly. With punters, even with like long snappers, these guys are doing like really intense like knee extension exercises where they're having to toss a ball behind them but straighten their legs out very aggressively. Soccer players, they're having to put that one leg out there and make a pass or make a kick. It's the same thing with them. But again, these guys are the elite of the elite. Once you get through like the couple of motions working on the kicking motion, and then you start working on, okay, let's add a ball into it with no distractions. And then you start working on, okay, let's have the ball come in, and then we're going to have some guy you have to hit that spot right there and kick to that guy. That's kind of what they're going to be doing for him. And that's going to help him go, okay, I can start doing this again. Okay, this is easier to do. As far as like going through and making it more like a chaos situation, then they're going to add in a dummy guy. A guy's going to run toward him, and he's got to try and run away from him and kick, or he's going to try and go ahead and get that punt off. And they're going to make all of these things happen just for him to start thinking, okay, I got to do this. And then he's going to go through a period of like, okay, let's do live. We're going to do some live stuff. Nobody's allowed to hit him, but you're going to run at him.
So kind of to summarize the length. So you're thinking that with this trio of injuries that Stonehouse has, the ACL is the one that takes the longest. So we use that rough 9-month span, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's the big thing with this. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So then 9 months, if he has the surgery mid to late December, that's really creeping up. You're in training camp. You're getting closer to roster cut down day. And week 1 is at a full 9 months or so. Then you've got the mental aspect. So where are you starting in that 9 to 10 months, the chaos part of it? Is it 6 months, or like where is that?
You almost kind of start immediately, depending on where the fracture's at and all that kind of stuff. Okay. But you almost start immediately. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Blaze Pod. There's all kinds of things out there that you can kind of like make use AI or use these technologies that they have there. And they have the best. It's an NFL team. They have some of the best technology in the world. They use these things. Okay, we need to settle down the inflammation, settle down all this irritating stuff, work on strength. But then we're going to start adding in like, okay, do you know where your knee's at in space? Do you know where your other leg's at in space? Because a lot of times these guys also have other knee injuries because they're compensating. That's some things you got to think about. But as far as like summarizing all of this together, that chaos kind of starts like on week 1. And then you slowly progress and you just make it more chaotic. The more he gets comfortable, the better control he has of that leg, and all the different variables you start adding in more too.
Wow. So pretty interesting stuff here. I mean, I think, a punter injury with this type of situation is unique, and I'm glad we've got you guys to lean on to help everybody, because I know Titans fans curious to see if Stonehouse can be ready for week 1 or not. Sounds like it's going to be a little bit of a coin flip, maybe play it smart and put him on the pup list for a couple of weeks and see how it plays out. But Dylan, thanks for the time today. This was super informative and great. Good to hear your expertise on what this injury situation looks like. So I appreciate the time today.
No, I appreciate y'all reaching out, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank y'all so much.
Always the Bone and Joint Institute, boneandjointtn.org to book an appointment. Injuries happen in life, and you got these guys to do it and take care of it in Middle Tennessee, right there at the Tollgate location with Dylan Green there, helping out with physical therapy. So I appreciate the time, and thanks everybody. And we'll talk to you guys on a Wednesday morning. Appreciate it.